Welcome, everyone, to the session of interviewing Mark Richt. We're excited to have him, and I know that you're going to enjoy the things that he's going to share with us today. I am Greg Gilbert. I'm the managing director of our Atlanta office. I have been with the firm going on 22 years and been able to work with Mark and Catherine for probably 15 years or so.
Yes, it's been a while.
Been a while. So some of you, probably everybody knows Mark Richt, but Mark was an assistant and really the right arm for Bobby Bowden for many years at Florida State. He was a graduate of the University of Miami, played at Miami, and after Florida State became the head coach at the University of Georgia for a number of years, and then got called home to his alma mater, Miami, to be able to go and be the head coach for them. And now he just came out with his new book called Make the Call. It is Game Day Wisdom for Life's Defining Moments, and it was released last fall. He's also serving as an analyst on the ACC network. He lives in Athens with his wife, Catherine. They've got 4 children and 2 daughter-in-laws,
There you go.
and then 3 grandchildren with a new boy, the most recent
No, you're
addition.
right. I shouldn't have slowed you down. You were right.
I was getting there.
Daughter-in-laws. I thought you were going to say how many. I was going right to the grandchildren.
Right. Okay, you
I
get
was like,
daughter.
we got 3 now because Champ was born. But we do have 3 grandchildren.
Yeah.
Jaden and Zoe, and then Champ showed up a couple weeks ago.
Right.
So we got our boy.
Yeah. So you had the two granddaughters, and now you got the grandson added to the mix. So it's incredible. And being able to spend a little time with you is going to be great. And as I think about just kind of our company and where you're at and some of the things I think could just be awesome to hear from you, I wanted to hear a little bit about your leadership journey.
Sure.
And in particular, I think about different shifts in leadership and the different roles that you had throughout your career. But I think a major shift happened, I would imagine, when you went from being the right arm for Bobby Bowden there at Florida State. You're the offensive coordinator and lots of other roles I'm sure that you had there in leadership, but then going and taking the head coach job at Georgia.
Right.
So for you, that I'm sure there's a lot of shifting going on.
Right. And really, you kind of want to start in the beginning of when I just became a graduate assistant coach at Florida State.
Sure.
Because you kind of start on the bottom of the totem pole, which is healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you don't want to start out there, but you learn a lot, and you get a chance to make mistakes as you grow and kind of do it anonymously, or not everybody's watching necessarily. But from a graduate assistant coach to a position coach to an offensive coordinator.
Right.
And in between, there was 1 year that I was at East Carolina University
Sure.
as the offensive coordinator, right in the middle of the time I was at Florida State, before I became the coordinator at Florida State. That was very healthy for me to go through the process of not only leading your position group of quarterbacks, but now you're leading an offensive staff, an entire offensive unit. All of a sudden your leadership grew exponentially. And like a lot of people, you're really not ready for that jump. So I made the jump at East Carolina University, got a chance to get some bumps and bruises along the way, but I know it was preparing me for the opportunity to be the offensive coordinator at Florida State. And then you mentioned moving on to being head coach. If going from position coach to coordinator was a massive jump, just to go from coordinator.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? So what were some of the massive jumps for you from going from position coach to the
again, as a position coach, I played quarterback, and then I coached quarterbacks, and that was it. It was me in the room with 5 guys,
right?
And I was older than everybody, and I knew a little bit more than everybody in the room, which kind of helped. But then eventually, if you have enough success, and a lot of times when you coach the quarterback position, and they're looking for a play caller and an offensive coordinator, that quarterback position coach a lot of times becomes the coordinator. And that's what happened for me. So again, I went from just that small room and that small little bit of influence, being in charge of the entire offensive staff, all the full-time coaches, graduate assistant coaches, and then now you've got maybe 70 student athletes that you're in charge of, and you have to motivate, and you have to figure out how to get things done. So that was really that's a huge jump in leading leaders, I guess, so to speak. And then when you go from a offensive coordinator position to the head coach, it's like times 10 of the jump from position coach to coordinator. It's until you sit in the seat of that leadership role, you really don't understand what it's going to be about.
Yeah.
And again, probably not quite ready for it, but I had a good role model, as you mentioned, as in Coach Bowden, getting a chance to watch him for 15 years and see how he did things. And we did things really at the highest level, won a couple national championships, and had a chance to be a part of a program that had true stability, and it had stability because of the leadership of Coach Bowden. And so, like 5 years prior to becoming head coach at Georgia, I had an opportunity to be a head coach at the University of Pittsburgh, and I really didn't think I was ready. I think God was telling me, "You're not ready, but you need to get ready." So for the next 5 years, not that I knew it was going to be 5 years, but as it turned out to be 5 years, I watched Coach Bowden a little bit more closely.
Yeah.
Some of the decisions he made, why he made them.
Processes, the systems,
Yeah,
his
and
leadership.
just like, what would I do if I was
Right.
in the shoes, you know? And so a lot of times I would question things when I was that coordinator, and then years later when you're in the chair, you kind of start to understand that there's a lot of things that the head coach knows that nobody knows.
Yeah.
Decisions you might have to make that people just scratch their head, but you know why you're doing it.
Right.
They don't quite know for sure why. If they had all the information, they may understand a little better. But there's a lot of things like that happen. And so as head coach, you're dealing with media. You're dealing with your administration. You're dealing with your fan base. You're dealing with the recruiting.
A lot of things that aren't coaching.
Just, so many things that aren't coaching. It's unbelievable. And so because of that, you're on 24 hours a day, 365.
Yeah.
And recruiting never stops. People think the off season you take a break, but you're getting ready for the next year in a lot of different ways. So big responsibility for sure.
What was the biggest, so when you went from even position coach to leading the offense, like what were the keys that you were learning in your leadership? So what did you need to learn or equip yourself in order to be more effective?
Well, I think
with how different it was.
When I became the coordinator at East Carolina, I had a chance to create an offense from scratch. Well, I only knew one way.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And so it was the Florida State way, which in some ways was good, that I didn't have a lot of different ideas rolling through my head. But I also inherited a staff, an offensive line coach, a running backs coach, receivers coach, tight ends coach.
Right.
All these men that we were all put in charge of putting this offense together. So I could have just said, hey, this is what I know, this is what we're going to do. I took a different route and said, hey, how did you guys do this? How did you protect this 3-step passing game? How did you block this running scheme? Or if you saw this blitz, how would you handle picking up the pressure or whatever it was? So we had a lot of dialogue, and I kind of put myself out on a limb to listen to other ideas, which weren't necessarily comfortable for me because they were new, and I could have just done what I always did and felt more comfortable. But because I was open and honest and allowing everybody else have their say, I learned a lot of football in that year, and some things that when I came back to Florida State helped us be more effective in how we did things. So when I finally became the offensive coordinator at Florida State, Coach Bowden had his system, his way of doing things, and I understood that. But he also, by the grace of God, or however you want to say it, he allowed us to change some of the things that he had been doing for years. He was run, play action, pass, and that was a big part of what he did. We began running no huddle offense, spread offense, shotgun, no huddle. We called it the fast break offense when we had Charlie Ward. We had a very talented young man in the name of Charlie Ward who eventually won the Heisman and a national championship. Well, he had a skill set that he was much more comfortable in a spread set and going high tempo and things that Florida State just never had done before. But Coach Bowden allowed us to create and grow and do some things that not everybody in America were doing, and certainly not at Florida State.
So then going from the offensive coordinator to then the head coach at Georgia, what were some of the things what was that shift in terms of leadership that you had to experience there and things that you had to learn or do?
Well, just the volume of responsibility, you had all your players, obviously, that you're responsible for, and the discipline of them.
Yeah.
And their well-being. What are we going to do to make sure these guys have the experience they need besides just learning X's and O's? I mean, how can we bless these guys' lives and help them grow into men? Because really, from college age boyhood to leaving college, hopefully manhood,
right?
You want to help them along the way. And if all we teach them is running and throwing and catching and blocking and tackling, we probably are failing them, especially at that collegiate level. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I stayed in the college game and not at the NFL, because I felt called to make a difference in these guys' lives. So you have that huge dynamic. Then you have all your staff members as far as coaches, but then you have academic people that you have to work with. You've got your nutritionist. You've got your strength and conditioning. You have all these other support groups, videographers and so many different people that, answer to you as the head coach, besides just scheming offense, defense, special teams. Now, when I first went to Georgia, I kept my role as quarterbacks coach. I kept my role as play caller.
Because you didn't know any better.
I didn't know any better. And then all these other things on top of it. And, of course, I didn't mention recruiting, but recruiting is just really, it's all year round. And let's say if you're a tight ends coach and you have a tight end visit campus, well, the tight ends coach needs to be there when they come on an unofficial visit. Or if you're a running backs coach or whatever, when your position group shows up, well, if you're the head coach, you need to be there when everybody's there.
Right.
There is no, weekend that's a little bit light because your position groups didn't show up that day. So you stay extremely busy with that, with the planning of the offense, defense, special teams, with just the overall culture of how you want to go about your business. And, I learned that it was definitely way too big of a job for one person. And I knew I needed help. Matter of fact, that's one of my first epiphanies when I first took the job. And about a month in, I was still staying at the hotel before the family showed up. And I remember distinctly laying on the carpet in tears, crying out to God, saying, I can't do this. I can't do this by myself. He's like, you're right, dummy. You need me. But, in my spirit, he said, I will definitely be with you. And so I knew God was with me, and I just started, day by day trying to tackle the assignment of the new responsibility.
So you talked before in many interviews about how you came to know Christ while your time as a coach at Florida State.
Right.
Through your career as a leader, how has your relationship and love of Jesus influenced the way that you've led?
Well, I mean, once you become a believer, your heart changes, obviously. You do become that new creation that God talks about. And so, after I became a believer, I had a new goal in life. And that was to just try to live a life that would be pleasing to God. Kind of plain and simple. Simple goal, not necessarily an easy goal.
Right.
But my goal was to do things in a way God would be pleased with. So every time you make a decision, if you're looking through that lens, you're like, would God be pleased with this? And my barometer for success was at night when I would lay my head on the pillow. If I had peace about something that I had done, then I was good. If I didn't have any peace, then I was like, I need to wake up in the morning and maybe change a decision and just say, I think it seemed like the right thing, but after sleeping on this thing, I don't think it's the right thing to do. So I think you got to be willing to change gears if your spirit is saying, hey, this isn't right. But, when you make decisions based on trying to please God, I think you make decisions that are more valuable in the long term. I mean, there's a lot of decisions you can make that might heal something immediately, but it may not be the right answer for longevity and down the road. So I think by trying to please Lord with what I was doing, it kept me on track, looking at the big picture.
So we've got something we call our management language. We recently redid it. It's called The Difference now, and it's basically it's a way of how can we live out what Scripture calls us to do as an organization.
Right.
So in the business world, and a part of that we have our 6 core values, that kind of lead us and guide us. One of our core values is life balance, right? And so in your profession is one of the hardest professions from a life balance standpoint because it's 80, 90 hours a week,
at least,
all the time. So how did you balance that? How did you guys, there was probably no balance, but how did you bring in your role as a husband and as a father, also leading men and women who had families? How was that a part of it for you?
Well, one thing, again, being blessed by being under Coach Bowden, he would always ask the staff, when are you going to see your kids? And the answer couldn't be, Thursday night after practice for dinner once a week. It was like every single day, when are you going to see your children?
Wow.
He understood that as coaches are chasing their dreams, a lot of times there's a trail of tears behind the coach. And that those tears belong to the wife and kids a lot of the time. And he didn't want us to lose that relationship. So he said, you're either going to see them in the morning or you're going to see them before they go to bed, but you're going to see them one or the other. So let's decide what we want to do. So we decided that we'd see them in the morning. And we didn't start our staff meetings till 8:30. So literally every in season, out of season, unless I was on the road recruiting, wake up with the family, have breakfast together, have a family devotion together, load up the kids in the car, drive them to school every day until they were able to drive, and then by about 8:15 on the way to the office, and let's get grinding. Now we worked late hours at night and didn't really see the kids at night much.
Yeah.
But every single day they saw Dad. Every single day we spent time together. And then the other thing was bringing them to practice. Coach Bowden didn't have a problem with kids at practice. He didn't have a problem with kids in the office. If they wanted to pop in and say hello or have lunch together or have dinner together or whatever it may be, he was all for that. We had family nights once a week where all the families would come together and the kids would go play and have a ball and the wives would get a chance to chat. And but there were things built in where every single day and every single week we were doing things. And then as my children got older and, say, for example, the night before every game, you're going to go spend the night at the hotel, team hotel. Well, I'd have a traveling buddy when John was old enough, then David, then Zach. Anya didn't do the traveling buddy, but she tried to help Catherine do the water girl thing, And the other thing, too, is my wife Catherine knew that when I wasn't coaching or just having some kind of coaching responsibility, I was with the family. Not that anybody who golfs is a bad husband or father, but for me and my job, when John turned 2 years old, my oldest, I just quit. I quit golfing. Like I couldn't justify, going 5 hours on the week. Hey, honey, I'll see you later. Yeah. And so, Catherine would never say to the children, hey, your dad's not here, blah, blah, blah. She was always like, Daddy's working for us and taking care of business. And when he's able, he's with us, And so people ask me what my hobbies are. I mean, my family was my hobby.
Yeah.
And one last little thing about the balance. I forgot where I learned it, but there was a road, and for me in Georgia, it was Loop 10. So from my house to the office, I'd go across Loop 10 or underneath it. And so that at that moment, I would mentally start thinking about
switch
football.
gears.
But on the way home, when I went past Loop 10, I was thinking about family. And that's so important because you could physically be there
Right.
and mentally be somewhere else.
Especially these days with technology and everything else,
Yeah,
right?
you're exactly right. So
Yeah.
we tried to do our best to, when I was there,
Mm.
be present mentally as much as I was there physically.
It reminds me of something Bruce Wilkinson said before. He talked about when he would come in, kind of drive in to the house and maybe into
Right.
the garage, on the driveway, that he would pause
Right.
and kind of switch
Yeah,
gears
got
and
to.
not bring all of maybe the frustration or the work or the
Right.
heaviness of the day into the house at that
Right.
time. And so it kind of reminds me of what you were saying.
Yeah, those kids don't know or care about what you're worried about. They just want to jump in your arms and play, So
Yeah.
got to make sure you can do that.
Yeah. That's beautiful. One of the things that we get a chance to do, I kind of talk about, like, if you wanted to learn a lot about the wisdom of life, being in the seat that we get to sit in with our clients is a very special seat that way, because you get to see the way people raise their kids. You get to see the way people handle money. You get to see
Right.
marriages come together. It's been an awesome seat to be able to see the generosity that you and Catherine have had through the years in all kind of different ways. And I know it's it's kind of like in scripture. On one hand, you're not supposed to, the left arm's not supposed to know what the right hand's doing,
Right.
but then we're also supposed to shine our light before men so that they can see our
Right.
good deeds and praise our Father in heaven. So it's kind of a balance there. Some things are going to
Sure.
be seen and other things aren't. And being able to see more, it's been incredible to see the generosity that y'all have had. Talk to me about where the generosity came from for the
Right.
two of you.
Well,
And let me know if Catherine had anything to do with
she had a little bit to do with it. Her love language is gifts.
Yeah.
Not only getting gifts, but giving gifts.
Yeah.
So her heart was kind of wired that way. For me, once I became a believer, it wasn't long before I understood that, tithing was, really giving back to God what He already gave you.
Yeah.
And so, I never had an issue with tithing. Some people are like, well, we got to make enough money to tithe, or I'm afraid if we tithe, we won't be able to pay the bills and all that kind of thing. For me, that was like kind of a no-brainer. But giving beyond the tithing was kind of Catherine's category. And but I think one thing early in our marriage, we went to a Fellowship of Christian Athletes event, and it was a fundraising event. We were just guests there, and at the end they ask if you can give, and so we decided to give $100 a month. We didn't have $100 a month, I could tell you at that time, but it just felt like the right thing to do. And I think too, going back to the decision to follow Christ, when you feel like in your spirit God is saying to do something,
Yeah.
you do it. Kind of plain and simple. It's simple,
Yeah.
in premise, but it's not always easy,
Right.
to do. And like just about any career decision I've made or any giving decision we've made, Catherine will always say, do you think that's what God wants us to do?
Mm.
And if you think that's what God wants you to do, well, I'm in. If not, if it's just your own little harebrained idea, I'm not in. So she always cared very much about my motivation for, jobs or whatever it is. Was my heart in the right place? And if it wasn't, she wasn't too excited about it.
And then that flowed through to the ways that you looked at your staff and others that were around and others
Right.
that you led. And
Right.
I mean, the generosity, sometimes, it's a lot of our generosity shouldn't just show up on our tax return.
Right. Oh yeah, there's plenty of things that we did to make a difference in people's lives. I mean, when you're blessed like we were, in the beginning we weren't making much of anything as graduate assistant coach or
Yeah.
volunteer coach and all that stuff in the beginning, but over time becoming head coach, the salary obviously changes quite a bit, and you're in position to help people, and you see needs, and you just feel led to do something about it, and it really does feel good to give.
So you've experienced this a lot, and this is something that we talk about internally in terms of when clients want to help out, maybe even family or others. How have you navigated that tension between wanting to help, but also being cognizant and recognizing that you didn't want to create an adverse dependency or
Right.
adverse effect? How did y'all balance that? Because a lot of
Yeah.
people face that.
Yeah, it's tough. And if you are making a good bit of money and you're surrounded by family members that, that have needs as well, sometimes, some family members aren't afraid to ask, and some of them, aren't so inclined to do that. But we have helped family members with the down payment on a house or something like that. We've helped our children with that kind of thing. Um, we helped our nieces and nephews go to a faith-based school.
Yeah.
But no one asked us. We just offered it because we love them and we wanted to offer that, opportunity. But gosh, we built a lake house that a few years later we gave away. We just realized we don't need this big beautiful home. But we had a vision for that to be a place where families could go that maybe couldn't afford that kind of a trip, and just marriage retreats and things of that nature, and that's exactly what it's been used for. And we're just really thrilled about that. So um, we've done things with pregnancy centers, and I mean I can't even think of all the things that we've done. Food banks, but you see needs and you have the ability to help.
Mm.
It's hard not to help.
Yeah. Love it. I love it. It's been a great example and encouragement, for us, and I know others as well. So one of the things that we talk about sometimes is we know what we say we do,
Right.
right, internally,
Right.
but it's always interesting to get a perspective of a client to kind of go, what would you say that we do, or what's been the value, for you? So for you and Catherine, what would you say that we do if you're talking to someone
Right.
else, and what's been the experience and what's been helpful for you
Well,
guys?
first of all, to be like-minded in faith was very important to us.
Mm.
We didn't want to, sometimes people are like, well, are you equally yoked to a group of people that you might want to do business with, so to speak? I think that's very important, but you can't just say, hey, they love the Lord, but they have no idea what they're doing. You want to have
Yeah.
people that really know what they're doing, and also have that same mindset when it comes to the faith. But just, I mean, I got my degree in finance,
Right.
so I have a little bit of an idea of how money works and things of that nature. But as far as all the planning that has to be done, I think if that's all I did, I'd be capable of doing it.
Sure.
But I was busy doing other things, So we needed structure, we needed goals, we needed to have somebody talk to us and say, what are your goals and how can we get there? And of course, as you know, we've got in the middle of a couple private businesses and,
Yeah.
giving opinions on that and also helping manage those things and structure those things, those deals in a way that, is legal, obviously, but also makes sense.
Yeah.
Just things that not 100% one-stop shopping, but in a lot of ways, it is one-stop shopping. If there was something that you guys weren't experts at, you knew where to go to find somebody who
Right.
was an expert,
Right.
and we trusted your relationships with those people.
Mm.
So instead of spending all this time trying to dig through, who to go to for this and who to go to for that,
Yeah.
we were able to use your resources because of our confidence and faith in how you guys do things.
Yeah. So if we've got people from all around the country, all kind of different roles. We have our national office. We have our 15 branch offices around the country. We've got financial advisors, planners, CSAs. We've got people in operations as well as a lot of the people at our national headquarters. What would be we talk about mission and having client impact
Right.
is really important to us. What would be kind of your charge or your pep talk or your challenge and
Right.
encouragement to us and to the people?
Well, I think there's just so much value in what you do. Peace of mind is a hard thing to put a price on.
Yeah.
And when we're all kind of grinding away, trying to make a living and try to raise families and try to do all the things that have to be done, when it comes to finances, sometimes we're not adequately equipped to handle it, or we don't have the time to handle it. And when you have someone you can trust that can get you in position to really think through what are your goals, not only, next year, but 5 years, 10 years, even into retirement and beyond, and then have a plan to get there, that gives you peace. That gives me a lot of peace of mind that we're everything that I'm doing as far as the grind of making a living isn't just getting thrown out the door.
Right.
And so I think, the peace of mind that I have working with you guys from A to Z when it comes to finances. And then, over the years, the friendships that you develop with each other, that's super valuable. And you guys do a great job of it, and you need to keep it going.
Yeah. So final question, as you kind of think about your relationship with money through the years, through different stages, what are a couple things that you've learned, and maybe has your perspective shifted through the years?
One thing real quick on vacation homes, when you build that vacation home that you think is awesome, and we built a wonderful vacation home on the lake. But there's a lot of expense to building it, and there's a lot of expense to keeping it up.
Yeah.
And it kind of limits you as to, hey, where we're going for vacation.
Yeah.
We're going back to the lake. Well, it's a beautiful place to go, but maybe we want to go skiing one day, or maybe we want to do something else one day, and go to the ocean one day, or one year. And so I learned that you don't have to own it to enjoy it.
Right.
It's okay to rent something for a week or two, spend some money on some different destinations throughout to where you're not just tied into one property. And, usually the more you have, the more headaches you have, so it's nice to, rent something for a week, use it. I mean, be respectful of it, but be able to walk away from it and not
hand the keys back at the end.
Hand the keys back when you're done. But I also learned that, I mean, if I'd have been a miser and a penny pincher, and where would we be right now as far as what's in our retirement fund right now?
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been a whole lot different, but we wouldn't have been able to bless all these people along the way. And we're still, you didn't let us go off the cliff too far to where we have more than we need right now, and we're able to bless our children, grandchildren, and hopefully beyond.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for taking time
with
us. Thanks for sharing stories. It's always a pleasure to hear kind of the way that God's been working in your life, and you've got so many great stories to share as well. So hopefully you all enjoyed the time that we had today with Coach Mark Richt, and have a blessed rest of the day.